Welcome to the June 30th meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. If you'll bow with me, I have the prayer and I have the pledge. Father, I thank you for this night, this chance that we get to come together. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity that you've put us in these roles to be able to make decisions that's best for our city and that's best for our county. Lord, I pray that you give us guidance, that you give us wisdom. Lord, that you continue to bless us, and that Father, for all of us to realize the type of city that we live in, and that's not by happenstance, that's by design. Lord, we thank you for what you're doing for us, and we continue to thank you for how you're blessing this city. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you have the consent agenda. You have 8 items that are listed.
I move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, you have old business. You have ordinance 22-012, fiscal year 23. This is the tax rate. This is second and final reading.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have item 10, ordinance 22-013, amending the zoning ordinance planning. This is second and final reading, ordinance 22-013.
It's item number 10.
Item number 10.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have ordinance 22-OZ-17, rezoning property along Medical Center Parkway. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Had a public hearing on this item last Thursday. It's for the TDK rezoning to from MU to both CH and PUD, and for it to remain in the Gateway Design Overlay District. Number one, Mr. Taylor gave a PowerPoint presentation last week on the details of the project, and those details included 232 multifamily apartment units, retail space, and approximately 60 to 65,000 square feet of office space, including the proposed corporate headquarters for TDK. The property, as I mentioned, is currently zoned MU, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of additional information. Under the current zoning, the proposed multifamily uses are not permitted. Back around 2017, 2018, Council adopted an amendment to the zoning ordinance, which required in the MU zone that no more than 25% of tracts that are, or of master planned areas that are greater than 10 acres to be devoted to multifamily residential. And so this was a part of an approved master plan from 2013 called Robert Rose Village West. And Robert Rose Village West included the former Peter D's here, this area that's being considered now, as well as the Everwood at the Avenue apartment complex. So the Everwood at the Avenue apartment complex was developed prior to that zoning ordinance amendment taking place. So it actually takes up approximately 58% of the master planned area for Robert Rose Village West. So under the current zoning, they are not permitted any additional multifamily residential units. And that is why they are requesting the planned development, because with planned development approach, you're not bound by the regulations of the existing bulk zoning, and that's the only way that they would be able to have multifamily units approved for this property is with the approval of a planned development, and hence the reason why they've made application, because under the current MU zoning for the Robert Rose Village West Master Plan, they are not permitted any additional multifamily units in that master planned area right now. At the Planning Commission level, we went over the exceptions to the zoning ordinance. As part of a plan development, the applicant is tasked with specifying the areas that he is requesting exceptions to in the zoning ordinance for the most comparable zoning district. And so in the applicant's pattern book, as well as in the staff comments that were provided to the Planning Commission when it voted on this item back on May the 18th, those exceptions were specified, including exceptions to the provision that do not allow multifamily for greater than 25% of a master planned area. So that is one of the exceptions that they are requesting. The other exceptions are listed in your in the staff comments that were provided in the agenda materials, and I'll go over those quickly. I mentioned regarding the exception to the multifamily provision, they're requesting an exception to the minimum building setback requirement along Robert Rose Drive. They're proposing to go from.
Sorry.
Adam,
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
hey,
Adam's been watching Stranger Things.
Completely for
Matthew, apparently with the computer there, you're finished.
I think it's telling me to wrap up, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll be done in about 45 seconds. So,
All right.
so they're requesting an exception to the minimum building setback requirement along Robert Rose Drive from 50 feet to 40 feet. And they're requesting exceptions to the zoning ordinance and design guidelines for the Gateway Design Overlay District to allow the use of faux wood as a building material in the building elevations. Mr. Taylor went over the building elevations in his presentation last week. Another exception is and that Mr. Taylor went over last week in his presentation, was the reduction in the parking requirement for the one-bedroom multifamily units from 1.5 spaces per unit to 1.1 spaces per unit. And his justification was that they're parking it for all the uses on the site: commercial, office, residential, and his contention is that there's very little chance of everybody being at the site at the same time. In other words, in many instances, the residents are not going to be using the parking spaces simultaneously with, or many of the residents, I should say, are not going to be using all of the parking spaces simultaneously with all of the office tenants using the parking spaces, simply because the hours that they will be occupying their respective buildings are likely not to completely overlap. And the last exception was to allow the sale of food and beverages in the park space and public open space for temporary special events. So as staff, we made an effort to point out those exceptions to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, when it considered the application on May the 4th, had some concerns about the application, the density. The applicants went back to the drawing board, reduced the density from, I believe it started out at 276, and reduced to 232, and increased the office space from 50,000 square feet to between 60 to 65,000 square feet. I'll just say 60 because I don't like to use ranges. And they have also eliminated, one of the concerns was regarding parking, and they eliminated some other parking reductions. So I'll be happy to answer any questions regarding the application. As you recall, last week we conducted the public hearing, and there was a desire to have all of council present to vote on this on first reading. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, I have one for Matthew while you're there. Matthew, you add some additional context to the change that was made based on acreage in 2018 and why we did that from your recollection?
Yeah, sure. So I think that there was a concern that because the mixed-use zoning district permitted multifamily, that developers were coming in wanting to develop strictly apartment complexes. And I think the intention of the mixed-use zoning district was to provide a variety of uses. And so I think the intention of that zoning ordinance amendment was to ensure that the intent of the mixed-use zoning district was upheld, and that the mixed-use zone and the Gateway Design Overlay District number 1 just didn't become just basically a multifamily zoning district.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like when we were having this conversation at the time, our concern was someone might come in and monopolize all the MU zoning for all apartment doors at the time, and it was a really large number that we didn't want the gateway to be built out. But at that time, that could have been done. It was an entitlement by right, by the zoning.
Pre that ordinance
2018,
amendment?
Correct.
Yes, yes. And so, you know, we have other examples. So, for example, the Everwood apartment complex to the south is just a traditional garden-style apartment complex.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
We didn't want Bill and Kurt to feel left out, so we waited, you know, on y'all to discuss this tonight.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I feel honored.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna dig in.
Okay.
Y'all ready?
I need to mention on behalf of the council members that if you're representing yourself, you'll have 3 minutes. If you're representing a group, you'll have...
I'll make it fast, man.
I'm just kidding, Rick.
I'll make it fast. So, long story short here, same kind of thing with some new information, but basically kind of what I said to the Planning Commission, I'll say to you guys, which is, you know, just to sort of explain my reasoning. This isn't, you know, everybody wants, I think, has their ideas about why Rick LaLance votes the way he does on some things or whatever, and that's fine. Everybody can say whatever they want to say, but I'm going to explain tonight to make sure everybody understands a couple of things that are in front of us. They go to the idea of what you just asked about, you know, why would we go through the process of changing the mixed-use ordinance? Why, you know, because of the things that we saw happening out there. I think that even maybe the developers in front of us I think the units that are over there by the storage units, that was MU if I'm not mistaken, and was built apartment complex on. This was 58%, already got apartments on it. That's not what I want to go through. I'm gonna try to go through this, but basically, look, here's the deal. You know, staff has not supported this since before Planning Commission. You know, you'll see something on our agenda tonight where there are exceptions, but planning staff has said these are the reasons why we still think this is okay, because there are benefits that outweigh the exceptions. They have not done this in this case at all. And that's been the case since before Planning Commission. The current land use map does not support it. The future land use map that we're working on, the new future land use map, does not support it either. Those land use maps take into account things like infrastructure. Certainly the new one that is being built took a lot of very detailed information into account. I think we all kind of agree the old one, we'll sort of take it or leave it. But the new one, I think they've done a heck of a lot more work on. It doesn't support this either. You know, I made a comment the other night about the number that I would kind of come up to, and I'll sort of explain that too, and it really does have to do with what Ronnie's asking. You know, I said a number that was like 172, so it was twice of 86. 86 units is essentially what you could get of 25% of this, because just to make this really fast, the dates that we did the new zoning ordinance for MU was after the current owners bought it, certainly before the new owners might buy it, right? The people who are bringing that to us don't own it currently. So I was willing to say, well, okay, I'll give 25%. I'm not going to fight that, argue that from an entitlement standpoint. That's the 86 number. Last week, the number is basically trying to give some accountants for the office building. So the numbers that I went over with you guys a few weeks ago, let me just kind of go over those with you again quickly, are over the last 4 years, there have been 9,232 units, residential units built in this city. 30% of those have been multifamily. 26% of those townhomes and 44% detached homes, okay? Based on and this is all stuff that planning staff has provided for me, and this is what I went through with Planning Commission. This part's what I went through with Planning Commission. Looking at what's in the queue right now for our next, call it 18 months or so, we don't, you can't guarantee when something's gonna get fixed or built. That number, we've got 3,324 units that are in the queue. So like they're permitted, they're being built right now, they're coming. 51% of those are apartments, 1,700. 23% townhomes and only 26% detached homes, okay? Perhaps the Planning Commission doesn't understand it, how I think we might, because we've certainly had plenty of conversations to talk about what our goals are of where that 33% number of apartments in our town is, right? The number of doors in our city, out of all the residential doors, 33% of them are apartments. I think we've all kind of said in public meetings that we're trying to see that number come down. If over the next couple of years, 51% of the doors are apartments, that number's not coming down, it's going up. If we add this project and the Broad Street project, we'll just call it 500 units, we got to come up with 1,650 homes in the next 2 years just to get to 30%. That's just for the new ones. That's not including what we got right now. To get to 20%, so to start moving that needle down from 33, we got to build 2,500 homes in the next year and a half or so. So if we keep approving this stuff, we can't sit around and keep talking about, we want to see the number go down, is my point, right? I mean, we've all said, at some point, at least 6 of the 7 of us have said, we think we want to see that number come down. We think that's what city residents want. We think that's what best fits with our budget, with traffic, infrastructure, blah, 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 service providers. So there's that, okay? That's the housing mix. I'm gonna talk to you guys a little bit about, did a little bit of extra work on sewer allocation. I brought this up at Planning Commission, not to this level. I'm not sure, some of this was a surprise to me. Maybe all you guys understand this, but this is something I think is extremely important going forward. So no matter whatever happens tonight, I hope that you guys will, who are going to be here 3 months from now, will take this into account. This particular project is in Basin 13. All right, so and you guys recall, we've just had a situation come up with another basin out Highway 99, where we've basically run out of space. So we got the big capacity issue that's at the wharf, the big number. And then each basin has its own limitations because of the pipes that are within that basin.
The straws, as Mr. Gore would say.
Exactly right, the straws. This straw, Basin 13, also has 13A and 13B surrounding it. They all kind of flow to this, but they're separated. Right now, in Basin 13, after having moved 2,500 units from 13B and from 13A into 13, okay, so we moved 5,000 units into this basin right here in the last 2 years to try to adjust for where growth is and things like that. We have 800 units remaining of sewer capacity as things sit right now. 800 total. You know how many acres of developable land there are in Basin 13? 1,270. All right? So with those current numbers, we're talking about using 25% of all the remaining connections on, what's that, 1% of the land. All right. You can see why I got a little bit of, why the sewer allocation gives me a little bit of pause, right? I mean, why putting so much density in one area? So we're 4,200 under where our original planning started out, where we're spreading these units, okay? Now, I'm gonna let, that is, by the way, the only thing I've backed out of the numbers on Darren's last report is Clary Park, because it's here. So 500 units is backed out, and so is 70 acres of those numbers I just gave you, because they weren't in the beginning of the year numbers that they provided us, okay? So that's the current situation right now. So I want to make sure everybody understands that's where we sit. There is a solution, not necessarily a solution, but there is something that's going to make it better. So, I mean, I'm going to give all the sides here, but this is still, I think, an important topic and something that, in my mind, still is a big enough number that we should really consider what the future impact of this will be. If we spend $12.3 million to upgrade this basin, just like we have $8.5 million that we're having to spend at the Highway 99 basin. I don't know what number that is, but whatever. We all know the one that we've been talking about. Okay? So we got an additional $12.3 million that we've got to spend in order to get this basin an extra 3,500 units. Okay? Not including those units, we're at 0.6 units per acre. And they're asking for 22 units an acre. Including these units, including the 3,500 new units that if we spend $12 million to upgrade it, which, let's kind of assume we're gonna, because we kind of have no choice at this point, that gets us to 3.2 units an acre. All right? If you use that number, and we're talking about 22 units an acre, I hope everybody can understand why, that I'm going down this road, so that you'll understand this isn't about whether somebody likes or dislikes apartments or density or anything. It has real ramifications, and here's the situation that we're looking at. If we continue to develop at the pace that we've done in this basin, we'll end up with 800 or 900 acres in this basin, because once the straw is built out and updated, it's over. Right? I mean, that's that. No matter how big the wharf gets, that's it. You got to dig up every pipe in the whole basin. Okay? So if we keep doing what we've been doing, if we do this and then what we've been doing, we're going to end up with 800 or 900 acres in that basin, going out Manson Pike all the way down to Armstrong Valley Road. Okay? The way that the basin runs. So, MTSU farm, the farm next to the MTSU farm, going all the way down south towards Armstrong Valley Road, there's going to be a whole lot of people that we have to talk to, like we talked to the guy out there out Mercury Boulevard, that we took away his entitlement completely and said he couldn't build anything on his property because we didn't have the sewer available. So the way that this pans out is the rush to get as much done as we can get, and as soon as we can get it done, the density that's been involved with what we've been doing already and what happened in those mixed-use zonings has an impact, and it's real. And what that impact is we run out way sooner than what we should. So I'm not even talking about the big WRF number here, okay, which that's its own issue, but that one's probably less of an issue to me than the basin issue. So the other 13A and 13B, it's also important to note, those are, one of them's at currently one of them's at 0.3 units an acre, one of them's at 1.1 units an acre. After we get done, one of them went to like 1.2 units an acre, the other one went to 3.6 units an acre, I think. All right, so best case scenario, from those areas that we've already kind of robbed from, it's not like we can take any more from there without having detrimental effect on those basins, or sub-basins, whatever you'd call those. Okay? So $12.3 million, that's ratepayer, that's can be assessed dollars, that's 3,500 units at $12.3 million, roughly $3,500, I think, per unit. So Yeah, sorry, one of them went to, 13A went to 2.1, 13B went to 3.9, sorry about that. But they're still, we're still right in that 3 range, 2 to 3 range. Here's the big, if that's not kind of enough to get you thinking on whether or not we ought to be viewing these things a little bit differently as it relates to density, something that I think would be important is there's probably a really good chance, based on, you can look at the average density that we have, even at an RS-15 zoning, we've probably already violated our capacity in the basin of what is out there right now, if we never update another one. And so what's the likelihood of us, if somebody wants to bring an RS-15, I mean, the Hale property's coming through planning right now. It's going from RS-15 to 2/3 townhomes, 1/3 homes. It's a 10 or 11 units an acre. That's 100 more units that I've not even already backed out of this. That's coming off that 800 also. So, it's just, I want to make that very clear to everybody that this stuff isn't just something that I use as, it's just something for me to have an excuse to vote for or against something. I mean, it's real. And the reality is we're going to be telling people they can't do anything a lot sooner than I think we all think. So that's the deal. I'm obviously not in favor of it because of that. I gave my number the other night, and I would reluctantly stick to it, but will.
What was that number? Just
172. Which turns out to be about 16 units an acre on the whole piece of property.
And the current request is 230?
21 or 2, I think.
232.
Oh, I'm sorry, 232. I thought you meant 2.
232.
Yeah, 232. So whether or not that makes the difference, I don't know, but, that's just an effort to try to be fair or whatever, try to be a dang team player or whatever you want to call it. But frankly, I'm, really, after seeing this, and look, here's the difference. Doing this property commercial is equivalent 2.5 units an acre on our sewer allocation. So we're talking 232 versus 30.
Can I go?
Mm-hmm.
Not that I want to follow you or
Is
anything.
that 3 minutes?
That was,
Under Rick LaLance's time.
Wasn't much more.
You keep
Like 9.
I'll just make some general comments, and, Kurt and Bill weren't here last week, and so I spoke in favor of this, and I think pretty consistently I've talked about maybe a little bit of a different spin, and certainly respect Rick and his view, and I think I appreciate that he's trying to guard those things. I think that's very healthy, and so I'm appreciative for that. But I do think I want to touch on a couple of points he made and talk about, just reiterate the comments I made last week. I think this would be a real struggle if it were purely a apartment deal. It's not purely apartment deal. I understand the density numbers may not change, and certainly Mr. LaLance's view may not change about it just because it's paired with the corporate HQ. And I think that's good. I think it's a good strategy on the developer's part. I think if that were not there, that would be challenging. I think we've all talked about how challenging that is. So I say that very openly because I think it's the truth. But when we talk about land use, I had a struggle when we talked about changing the acreage when it was all MU, and we were concerned that it would all be potentially used as apartments. I was concerned about that too. I didn't feel great about us going in and saying we're going to restrict it to X amount per acres, but I understood why we were doing it, and so I went along with it. But part of the reason I did that was I think the spirit of what we have done consistently has been, let's let each project speak for itself. Let's see the value and the benefits of each project, and let us try to weigh them. We've talked about that with sewer allocation, residential versus commercial, townhouses versus single family. I think we have a lot of conversation about what's good for the city. I also think, based on my limited experience here, I do think council has a way of influencing the way planning views each project as it comes in. So I think it's hard sometimes to say planning doesn't support it, when the truth is, a lot of times, planning is getting their direction from us about what they think we want to see and what we're comfortable with. So if you dovetail that into the land use map, the new land use map that planning was obviously very involved in, it makes sense that it's not consistent, because we've talked a lot about wanting less density out there, wanting less multifamily out there. I think all that's true. But I do think we also talked about envisioning, and I wasn't here, but envisioning what we wanted the gateway to look like. And I think HQ at the gateway is something that we wanted, if we could get it. We've got a corporate headquarters site right now in the gateway that we've had trouble finding something, so we're going to talk about that tonight. But I just don't think, in my opinion, that the difference in 60 units between 172 of what might be supported by some and where the developer is today is going to wreck the sewer system.
All right, then I won't support 172. I'm at 0.
Okay, so that's your prerogative. Yeah. But I just think the opportunity cost, to go back to what it means to invest capital in Murfreesboro and having the opportunity to have a local company invest the kind of money that they're talking about investing in our city, those are rare opportunities. And we talk a lot about attracting headquarters and companies here. We have one right now that wants to invest in the gateway. And, to their benefit, they're certainly trying to maximize the site. I understand that. I think we know that. But I don't believe, even at 230, that's going to wreck the infrastructure there. I don't believe at 230 it's going to wreck the ability to serve sewer. And to that point, I think it's a great conversation to talk about how many connections are left, how much capacity is left. But I think we've also talked about, we wanted to judge that case by case, and we didn't want to say, hey, you can only have X when you come in. We wanted to weigh each project. So I'll stop and just say, for me, it's a pretty easy vote to support it. I'm appreciative for anybody to invest capital in the community. I think if you're going to have density, I think we've also talked about downtown, and the gateway is where we wanted that. And so if we have limitations there, I think that's why we turned staff loose to solve those problems. I'll stop. I think I was shorter than you, so.
The sky may be falling. I agree with Ronnie. But, caveat, I think this conversation needs to be had.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think, and I'm going to bring something up in a couple weeks in other business. I don't want to bring it up tonight. But I think we've got to get this under control, or we're going to be at a total red stop of all growth. And we've got to understand that we've already got one basin we're like that at. If we've got another one we're like that at, we can't continue doing this. The corporate headquarters is kind of the hook that brings you into the boat. If it wasn't for that, if it was just apartments, I'd be a hard no. But I think that corporate headquarters is strong. But this discussion right here has to be had sooner than later.
Yep, agree.
So, Mr. Gore, could you come to the mic, please? I'm just trying to verify what Rick said. Is that true, what Rick said, to a certain extent?
Yes.
We don't know if we can trust Rick. So we want you to tell us if that's true or not.
Mr. Lance and I had a 2-hour session on Monday to go over all those numbers.
God bless you.
So he is, his numbers are as accurate as I can provide. He may have had a couple of math errors there, but I wasn't going to stop him. Close enough.
Not a chance.
So are you saying that if we did this project, there's a chance that we could not develop other future projects down the road?
I've tried to say this, I've tried to think about this since I've talked with Rick, and what's the best way to kind of say it in a generic way where a lot of folks can understand. But you kind of have, you've got land, and you've got a certain capacity to develop that land. And density obviously is a major component of how much capacity do you want, if you want to put 16 units per acre, 2.5. So to me, that was the future land use try to attempt maybe to distribute or proportion out kind of a density or the capacity you wanted your land to develop at. You've got sewer capacity. You've got a certain finite amount, so you're trying to reconcile the two, right? Do you try to spread it over so that everybody has the equal share, or do you look at projects of opportunity that bring in a corporate headquarters, or that bring in jobs, or that bring in some unique component that demands a higher capacity for the sewer? I think, yes, at some point, we're going to run into a situation where not all the property is going to be able to be granted sewer, conventional sewer. We've talked about the step system. If the city wants to get out of the step system business, then those properties that don't get conventional sewer may have to be served by a consolidated utility district, which will limit density substantially. So I think we're in our, I don't want to say infancy. We've done this for 2 years, but I do think what I've showed Mr. Councilman LaLance is I'm trying to balance some things on that already, where I'm trying to take some upstream basin capacity and reserve it for downstream basin capacity. That's based on my professional judgment and trying to, again, be somewhat equitable. There's situations in that model, if you guys want to come look behind the curtain, you could give all that capacity to those upstream basins, and that downstream basin would be choked off. So it really is a balancing act, and that's we're trying to reconcile land capacity to sewer capacity. And as we get smarter, as the future land use map matures, as our sewer allocation assessment report matures, we can start trending things. We can start showing you. You all will become smarter. We'll become smarter. And we'll just have a tool that you guys will be able to utilize more and more in the future for these types of discussions, if that makes sense.
So is the 1,270 acres, is that in the city limits or not in the city limits?
That is in our flow monitoring basin. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that all that's in the, I don't suspect all of that's in the city limits. Some of that is going to be unincorporated area.
Okay. Okay.
It's going to be the area that will be potentially served by that main sewer collector, main
Could
sewer
be,
interceptor.
yeah, okay.
Could be. And we talked about, I don't want to go on, but we talked about potential levels of confidence. What's the confidence level that the 300 or 400 acres owned by the Horde family would ever develop on sewer? That may be a farm forever. So you may want to start assigning confidence levels to certain properties that may not develop very.
Talking about the Williamson family or the other part of the Horde family?
Well, both. The Williamson tract is a perfect example that may not ever develop on. So you may want to start parsing those type of acreages out of the discussion.
How much more retail is that giving us? I'm sorry, I wasn't talking to you.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thanks, Darren.
I don't know. I wouldn't know the answer.
They had retail, and then we asked them to go back and add some more retail.
I believe that the retail numbers did not change. That
The square footage or what?
the office numbers increased, but Mr. Taylor?
Okay.
Councilman Harris, Matt Taylor of SEC. Mr. Blomley's right. At Planning Commission, we decreased the number of apartments by approximately 44,
Right.
so about 20%, give or take. And then the office building increased. I think we're at 50,000 originally. We increased that to be between 60 and 65. And so we're not going to be no less than 60, no more than 65,000. So we increased that by about 20 to 25%.
I said retail, I meant office.
Yes, ma'am. The retail did stay the same. Our
Right.
commercial out parcel did
Yeah, I
stay
meant
the
office.
same.
I said something else. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yes, ma'am. And for the sewer, we understand that is an important aspect of every project. That's why, an availability letter was one of the first things that we did for all of our utilities out here, sewer included. So we understand that is a part of the conversation. And that's why we checked that box early with our water sewer department. I'll be happy to answer any other questions while I'm up here.
Are we going to talk about traffic? I know that came up last week. I know, Craig, you sent out an email we cannot talk about approving this without talking about traffic plans and how that is going to correspond with the two developments that we're talking about tonight. I think that's crucial. We can't say, let's approve this and then come back and talk about traffic. We need to talk about traffic. And nobody said a word about traffic.
If I can, Councilman Wade, we agree that traffic is another important part of this project, like it is with every project. We did a traffic study, very in-depth. We studied, I forget how many intersections. It probably said a lot of the same things that other traffic studies had said. And so, you know, one of the important parts of that traffic study pointed out was the interconnection that we're providing between Robert Rose and the Avenue, Robert Rose and Maple Grove, to try to alleviate some turn-in movements onto Medical Center, let people get to the Avenue instead of having to get on the Medical Center, or coming away from the Avenue instead of having to get on Medical Center. You know, we also did some comparison between if this site was developed fully commercial in comparison to what we're proposing. The traffic numbers generated by a full commercial site here are basically the exact same as what we've proposed here. Only difference is this offers the opportunity for people to walk and potentially decrease some of those trips. Whereas if this is all office, you have to originate those trips from off-site.
Craig, is there? Go ahead, Bill.
I just wanted to say thank you for saving this and other projects. They're so simple to solve.
Nobody's ever going to miss a meeting again.
That's right, yeah. No, but the one thing that comes to mind is maybe each of us to consider, and all of us are going to come with the same facts, are going to come to different conclusions as to what they tell us, but you know, planning is not the end of the process. It is basically a tool that we use to kind of see into the future. And the thing in a dynamic community like ours is that it's moving, and things are changing very rapidly for us. So you say this is what we want, but it doesn't develop in fine segments that everybody gets an equal portion, and we're going to divide this through whatever acreage we have out there, and we're going to disseminate that. People have to make an evaluation as to their investment, and what we need to do as council is to see if there is a value for the development that they're placed before us. A return on investment, basically. And to consider what might happen with 1,200 acres is maybe a bridge too far to be able to decide what that is and what that opportunity, because quite honestly, a lot of things change. I think there is an economic value to this proposal. Other things that I value in this is that it comes from a local individual, someone who is vested in our community already in several different aspects and places in our community. So it tends to, at least me personally, bend the needle a little towards approval when I see us having to make some exceptions to this. I had a conversation with some of the planning staff too, and I asked, were all your concerns, and by the way, that has not been something that's been traditional, is to clearly express planning staff's perspective or concerns. They don't make the decisions, we do, but they should raise issues, and they did in this document at the planning level. Did the applicant address your concerns in an adequate fashion? And I got a yes. So that helps me make the decision that I believe I can support this project. But I do recognize, as Mr. Wright said, this conversation, the more information, I don't know if you got this document, I'll maybe pass it around to you. A couple of years ago, we got a document, and we were getting it, it's from the planning department. It kind of informs us as to where we are with permit. And you probably looked at it, Rick, if I'm guessing. You've probably seen this document, but pass that around. It gives us some information, and I'd ask that that be delivered to us on a monthly basis so that we can kind of keep track as to where we are in permitting and where we are, and some of the information that you were giving us as to what's in the cache, basically. It's hard to make those decisions with some forward thinking without knowing where we are, and I appreciate the information that you gave us on this particular project. But more information, more discussion, more direction to our planning staff, so that when a developer brings a project forward, that we give them a clearer picture as to what our expectations are. And I think that would help us at the planning level, but I know it would help us at this level as well, to make better decisions.
Yeah, I guess, look, this is going to be what it's going to be. It's fine. It's not going to be the end of the world either way. It could be the end of somebody getting their property developed, which I think is really bad. And I really think the word hilarious sounds kind of smart alecky, but it just is hilarious to me that we can sit here and talk about giving good direction to planning staff from a council's perspective after we directed them to change the MU ordinance to avoid this exact thing, and then we're sitting here supporting it anyway, and then to act like we can't even envision into the future far enough to see that this is going to be a problem from a sewer standpoint. It's already happened in one basin, and it's already happened in a piece of property that we've already had to make a very difficult decision on. This isn't some future maybe what if. This is math, and it's if we grow, the faster we grow, the faster that math is going to happen. So I don't know. It doesn't compute to me, I guess is really the right way to say it. But it's all right. That's the way I think about things, and it may be different than others, and that's all right. I just started caring about this 2.5 or 3 years ago when this first came up, instead of waiting until down the road until it's a worse problem than it was then and is today, and it'll get worse down the road. As long, everything that we approve at over basically 3.5 units an acre, period, by math, makes the problem worse. It's simple. It's not questionable. So it's okay. I get that there are some benefits to this. I get that the people in the community are good people and do good things for the community. I'm with all that. I can't see the offset for me. So that's it.
I agree with everything Rick just said about you can't take stuff away from other people. So by approving this, in essence, somebody we're taking away from down the road, maybe. And so that's a major concern of mine as well. And if you're going over 3.5, we got a problem. Going forward, we probably need to stick around 3.5. It's simple math.
We talked about 2 months ago impact fees, and that conversation went away. Kind of seemed like this was the perfect opportunity, but I guess maybe we'll bring it up next week.
I'll make one other comment, and that is that the challenge for me in carving out per acre allocation for everything, if we did that math, is you don't know what you're going to get, and you don't know when you're going to get it. And so, the problem with that is we're making a lot of assumptions about what the line looks like as if it's linear. And the truth is it may not work that way. But what we do know is what we have right now in front of us. We think we know what the consequences will be, but we do not know exactly what the consequences might be. We do not know that we're actually effectively taking capacity. We just know that based on what we have today. But there are a lot of things that change. I've had a lot of conversations with Mr. Gore about technology, about capacity and how we process. And, I know not to confuse this, but we've got the straws and the bucket and all the conversation that we have. But I just believe if we know, and all I can do is speak for me, if I think this is a good project for the city today, that's the best decision I can make versus what it might be in the future. So I don't want to cut conversation off. Mr. Wade, you want to Mayor, you didn't even speak. I don't want
Yeah, I wanted to just publicly say, I'm not voting for this I'm not voting at all for the project, either yes or no. I don't have a financial benefit in this project. I'm not associated with this project, but I do have close relationships with the company, and I don't think with TDK, and not financially, but friendship, and I don't think it's right for me to vote on it. But I want to make two comments regarding the MU zoning. We changed, in my opinion, so, and again, don't take this for or against, we changed the MU zoning in 2018 or 19, in my eyes, because Henley Station was a great example. You've got 600 or 700 apartments that are out there, and you got a 2,000 or 2,500 square foot restaurant. And then that's what the development, it technically met the standards for being mixed use. And so then we ended up where people were parceling units together and saying, well, even though this is a different owner, well, this is part of the mixed-use development that makes that. So we tried to actually say that mixed use was mixed use. The last thing, this is just, I know Rick has gotten heavy into sewer. That didn't go out the way that didn't come out the way it was meant to come.
Well, you just keep coming. I mean, it could be worse. What do you mean it didn't come out the way you meant for it to?
What I'm saying is, I don't know how the 1,250 acres that may or may not develop, and my guess is a significant portion of that is in the county. I don't agree saying that we're taking away something from someone who is not even a city resident right now. And if we did that, then we wouldn't ever develop anything in the city, because we would be saying we're going to save it for what may come next. And so, I'm with that, it's not simple. It's not easy to just say it's 3.6 units an acre, because it doesn't fit in, this is just my opinion, it doesn't fit in that box. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be hard for future councils to ever say that we're just going to be at 3.6 units an acre. I think future councils, the ultimate decision councils are going to have to make, are going to have to say, how much is an assessment district going to be if you want to improve the sewer capacity in an area? Like in this case, exactly what you were saying, that number's $3,500 a unit. For those people who, if they want to develop in the future, then it's $3,500 a unit, and the city's got to make the decision on whether to do that. So it's just a hard decision to try to forecast what may happen in 10 years and what may not happen. But Rick, you know this, and you and I have had this discussion offline. There's one thing that you'll never question with Rick, and that's his heart on where you are and what you say. And I do think everything that you're bringing up is exactly the context and what we're going to have to discuss. Like, I don't believe, and last thing I'll say, like Armstrong Valley and all those things, I think if we knew now what we knew 20 years ago, we wouldn't have ever said out on Armstrong Valley Road, some of the developments that are way out there, we would have extended sewer out there. But that's why Rockville is one of the worst performing sewer assessment districts that we have in the history of the city. And so those are all discussions that are going to have to be made.
So here, just, maybe I'm taking it wrong, but the reason, we have an urban growth boundary, right?
Yeah, but the urban growth boundary really went away completely.
Now we have an infill line, whatever it's called.
The urban growth, but when the annexation laws changed 10 years ago, the urban growth boundary, it went away.
I guess I'm just kind of confident that we're going to continue to grow. I feel like banking on that we'll continue to grow is safer than banking on probably stuff isn't going to come. I think it's probably safer to say probably stuff is going to come than it is probably it's not. That's why I guess I care about it a little bit more, but it's all right. Y'all get it over.
Can we get back to traffic, Rick? Craig, can you talk about traffic and what's the traffic assessment we're going to do and how this is going to lay out with not only this development, but the other development that we're going to talk about tonight?
Right. We, as Mr. Taylor said, that this project had its own traffic assessment and made some decisions were made based on that assessment, and in fact, the project was designed to improve traffic flow over there for around that intersection. Medical Center's been a extremely busy road for a long time. It's been on our 2040 plan to develop, and it actually was developed to be expanded. It's the infrastructure that was put in there was put in with the intention that it would be expanded in a relatively short period of time. And we may be behind the eight ball on expanding that project. So a couple other economic development projects, one of which we're going to talk about tonight, has pushed staff to really take a hard look at that and see if there was the potential for finding the funds and making recommendations to council on how it would be funded for expanding medical center. And so that's due back to council. The projects we're talking about will go through the planning phase and in the design phase, and that's really where traffic gets tackled to a big extent. So it's fair to let that process go before we finalize. But we've made some preliminary work, and I shared that with council on how it could potentially be funded, where medical center could be expanded in a relatively short period of time, because it's not a state highway. It's a city road. And how that potentially could be funded if council chooses to go that route. This project benefits from that, obviously, because it's a bigger road. But this, the medical center and taking a look at what we might do in the future on medical center wasn't driven by this project. It was other economic development projects that really started that process.
Okay. Council good with that? I mean, because I think that's crucial, that if we're talking about bringing two new developments within the city and to expand the medical center and making sure that the infrastructure is set up to handle this type of traffic.
And there's a pretty good argument that it needs to be done one way or the other. And we have Clary Park coming in, who will do part of expansion, and that's very close to this project. So it'll benefit this project as well. But while we're doing that, and Clary Park's doing their part on their project, that makes it even more timely to pick up and do a cost-effective approach for the city on that portion of medical center, at least.
Okay. I hadn't said anything about the project, but let me talk about the project a little bit. I think this has the potential to be a good project for Murfreesboro. I'd love that there's an opportunity to bring a corporate headquarters here. I'm not in love with additional apartments, but sometimes you don't always get what you want. But we're getting something out of it, and I think it benefits our community. But one of the good things, as Ronnie said, TDK has been good for our community, but that doesn't mean every time somebody brings something to us, we got to approve it. And I think at this point in time, we have two developments, and I think that will be beneficiary to our city. And I would make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Brown, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
No.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Abstain. Hey, I would like to make one quick comment, Craig, and to our staff. We've had this impact fee discussion. I don't know if it's possible, as we talk about impact fees, we know in the Medical Center Parkway that there's road improvements that need to be done, that we've made the development community pay on their frontage. But it just dawned on me as something we've not talked about, that we tell people in sewer assessment districts, if we know the road, a sewer project is X number of dollars, we say, look, anybody who comes into that assessment district, you're paying X number of dollars per unit. Why can't we do that in defined areas where we know that road projects need to happen? Where, I mean, I know we do that with some that we already say per unit, but if Medical Center Parkway, we know it's going to cost $10 million, why couldn't we put a road assessment district to say that new growth that comes in there, you're going to be paying for that road to be widened?
Yeah, Adam and I were just talking a little bit offline. I think a special assessment district, we'll have to look at it and see what it's allowed, but we both think that roadways would be included in that type of assessment district. So we'll take a hard look at that and see if that's another avenue of funding for roadways. Yeah, it's a good idea.
It's one way that if you come in the area, the growth's paying for it in the area.
Particularly in an area of very active development. Yep.
All right. We'll move to new business, and you have ordinance 22024, removal of accessible sewer charges.
Mayor, Council, thank you. This is a revision of City Code 33-1. It removes the minimum monthly sewer fees for properties that have access to sanitary sewer, but are not connected to sanitary sewer. Since July of 2016, we've charged the minimum monthly fee of $10.22 to about 165 properties that have sewer abutting or are adjacent to their property, and this ordinance revision would remove that monthly fee. It has about a just over $20,000 revenue loss. I'm available to answer questions if you have any.
There's a gentleman that has emailed repeatedly about this, and it affects 165 people that are paying for a monthly service for the opportunity to be on the sewer. And so I didn't even, it was one of those things I didn't even know we were doing that. And so it's taken a while to go through, but I think, in my opinion, it's safe to say if you're not hooked on the sewer, you shouldn't have to pay for it until you tap on to the sewer.
Are there other questions? Motion approved.
Second.
Motion second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Adopt, the next under resolution, adopt revision of the Rutherford County Hazard Mitigation Plan.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This is it says revision, but this is actually just an update to the Rutherford County Hazard Mitigation Plan that has to be, has a resolution passed by all of the cities within our county for that update. We last updated this in 2020. I think it was February of 2020, and this is just an update to that plan that we would be passing by resolution. I can answer any questions that you may have.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thanks, Chief. Ratifying charter amendment to create Community Investment Trust. This is legal. Resolution 22R19. Mr. Tucker.
Yes. So this is the last step that's required for the City Council to amend its charter and incorporate the private act that was adopted by the General Assembly. This private act would allow City Council, authorize City Council to create the Community Investment Trust. The Community Investment Trust is the trust that we've talked about for the last, probably 18 months or so, and would be funded from the proceeds of the sale of MED. As you'll recall, earlier this year, you passed a resolution requesting that the General Assembly enact a private act authorizing the city to amend its charter, and that was passed unanimously by City Council. That request was forwarded to the General Assembly and members of the county's legislative delegation advanced this bill in the General Assembly, and it was passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor. And again, the final step for to incorporate this and make it part of the city's charter is for City Council to ratify and approve the private act. And so staff is recommending that City Council approve the private act. Happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
If I could dovetail on that just real quick, it's the final step to amend the charter. It's the first step in putting together the trust. So once we get the charter amended, then we need to build the trust board through council action and put the trust into place. And so there's a few other steps, just so council knows.
I know there's a lot of work that has gone into this, and I want to commend everybody, our legal staff, our state delegation, Mr. Lance, all the folks that have really labored long hours to bring this to fruition, and I applaud everyone that has made this possible, and I would move that we approve this resolution.
Second. Craig, when will we have a motion a second, when will we start having the discussions on who to appoint on the boards?
I'll send back out the applications that we drafted, and then we can get those out to individuals. We'll put them on the website. We'll put some media out about it and gather some applications. So we'll do that right away.
And just to follow up on a related note, I received comments back this week from outside counsel on the trust agreement. So we're moving forward on that, and that will be something that we'll be bringing back to City Council within the next several weeks to a couple of months.
Motion a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. When we get to talk about that, I hope the council would consider, there's been two people who've been very intimately involved in this process, and I think one no-brainer would be Rick LaLance serving on the big community board, the actual trust board, if his work would allow him to do that. And then I also think Mr. Martin serving on the community board would be important for the city to be able to have that historical knowledge of two people who've gone through this whole process. So as we're filling out those applications, if both of y'all would consider that, it would be beneficial to have their help, I think, moving forward with this. So maybe that would be two spots that would be filled.
Well, the trust board has one representative from council on it, or is that the community board?
I would have, I think.
Community board could, certainly. But
I think the trust, let me look at this. I think the trust
said no.
Yeah, I think
does have one.
I think it does.
I don't think. I think we all, Bill, initially talked about would be accountants, financial advisors, and I thought that's what we talked about.
Yeah, the trust document that we talked about does have qualifications on it that would be.
Yeah, I don't think there's a council member.
What it says is that
Something.
the board of trustees shall consist of seven members appointed by the city council in accordance with the private act and then the trust agreement. And it says no more than one current member of the city council it's permissive, may serve on the board of trustees at any time.
Okay.
So it's not required,
Just says may.
but may.
Okay. I thought I'd read something. Okay.
All right. We now have sewer allocation variance 285 North Rutherford Boulevard.
No.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. This is for a bifurcation project, which is what a term that us in the planning department are getting very familiar with. It's an existing apartment complex located at 285 North Rutherford Boulevard. It's on the very south end of campus, very south eastern corner of campus along North Rutherford Boulevard. The current density of the project is 15.75 dwelling units per acre. And this is one of those apartment complexes that was developed roughly 15, 20 years ago in the vicinity of campus that has a lot of the 4-bedroom, 4-bath units with the common area in the middle, and each of those 4 bedrooms rented out to an individual. What we're seeing is companies buying those apartment complexes up that are near the university, turning them into more traditional apartment complexes, removing the 4-bedroom units, and that's what All Beyond Residential proposes to do in this instance. They're proposing to bifurcate, as they call it, all the 4-bedroom units. Right now there are 108 4-bedroom, 4-bath units in the property, and they're proposing to convert those to studios, 1-bedroom, 1-bath, and 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. Because that will result in an increase in the number of units, they're having to propose a sewer allocation variance. So, the multifamily zoning permits 9 dwelling units per acre currently. The project is currently at 15.75 dwelling units per acre, and the proposed density is 22.5 dwelling units per acre. So it's an increase over the 9 units of 13.5 units, and an increase over their current density by 6.75 units per acre. With all that being said, however, they are actually reducing the number of bedrooms and bathrooms by 162 on each account. So it's anticipated that the actual sewer consumption on this property will be less than what is are currently being consumed right now. And so that's one of the benefits that staff sees in this project. This actually went to the Water Resources Board back on March the 22nd, and they recommended approval of this sewer allocation variance, subject to replacing all of the existing fixtures in the development with low-flow fixtures. Staff is supportive of this application based on the reduced sewer consumption. And I know it's kind of odd to be bringing you a sewer allocation variance for a project that's actually going to reduce sewer consumption, but that's what is proposed. And we also feel that the investment into an aging apartment complex, with this being between 15 and 20 years old, is a good reason for staff to support the proposed sewer allocation variance. We'll be happy to answer any questions regarding the variance request. And Mr. Justin Tringle with Albion Residential, the new owner of the property, is here if you have any questions for him about what they propose to do.
I'd like to talk to you guys about some sewer allocation statistics that I have.
Should I just go ahead and sit down?
Oh, you're not right. Any questions for staff?
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move. Thank you, Mr. Palmer. We'll move to, and thank you for your work on the complex as well. All right, we'll move to number 16, which is contract approval for the City Hall parking garage sprinkler renovation Phase 2.
Good evening, Mayor,
Shirley.
members of the council. I'm here to seek the approval of a contract with Rice Construction for Phase 2 of the City Hall parking garage sprinkler renovation. In October of 2021, the city contracted for Phase 1 of the City Hall parking garage fire suppression sprinkler system renovation to replace the main service line piping. That piping has been completed at this time. Phase 2 is to replace the existing branch line piping, sprinkler heads, and 11 sprinkler valves. This project will extend the life of the sprinkler system and keep it fully functioning. Rice Construction was awarded the competitive bid at a price of $533,470. The county will reimburse the city for 31.5% of the cost. This approval allows the city parking garage sprinkler system improvements to reach final completion, ensuring a safe parking garage. The funds are funded by CIP funds from remaining funds from projects from FY16 and from FY22 bonds. I can take any questions at this time.
No questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you,
Thank you
Scott.
for your time.
Item 17 has been removed. We have item 18, lease termination and release, 2140 North Thompson Lane. Administration. Mr. Tindall.
Council recall that we purchased 2140 North Thompson Lane for city offices for the fire department and the parks department. When we bought that, we knew at the time that there was an existing tenant in that building, and so we've made an agreement with that tenant to vacate so we can begin renovations on the property. And so the negotiated amount of $127,500 buys out the lease, pays for the moving costs, and adequately compensates the former tenant in a fair manner. So we'd ask council to approve that amount. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to 19, development agreement with Notes Live Incorporated.
It's a development agreement with a major economic development project that we've been working on for a while, and council recall that we had an announcement and discussed this a few weeks ago. It's a project that will go on the 18-acre parcel at Gateway and Medical Center. The city has owned for about 20 years. On that will be a high-end restaurant, Bourbon Brothers Smokehouse and Tavern, and we'll also have two entertainment complexes or buildings, venues on there, the Boot Barn Hall and Sunset Music Coliseum, which is an outdoor amphitheater. It is about $30+ million private investment into developing those facilities. The purchase price on the property is set on a square foot basis because design will indicate how much actually the property will be required for the venues itself. Between 8 and 9 acres. The remaining acreage will be continue to be held by the city. It will be developed by the developer, Notes Live, into a parking facility that will allow the city to have city events on that, and also have a trailhead along the Stones River that is at the back end of the property. The design process will include sound studies to assure that the surrounding community is protected from the sound on the outdoor amphitheater. The amphitheater will face towards the golf course and then to the mall, so there's no residential community on that side, and sound will be directed in that manner. As we discussed earlier with Councilmember Wade's question concerning medical center, this project was and handling the traffic from this project was part of the staff's work in looking at medical center and improving medical center. Of course, the most of the venues will be handled adequately with medical centers there. The events, which are anticipated about 20 to 25 events that will be in the amphitheater, obviously brings in a lot more people. It's designed to be about 4,500 seating, not 4,500 cars, because more than one person comes in a car to those type of venues. But we want to make sure that medical center is adequate for this one and another large economic development project that's slated not too far from here, and will be important for medical center to be addressed for those two projects. Mr. Bob Mudd, who's representative from Notes Live, is here and can answer any additional questions the council may have, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those as well.
I have some concerns with, I go to a lot of concerts. I'd actually be at a concert with my son right now if I wasn't here. He's at the Motley Crue show. I go to a lot of shows. I have a concern with an amphitheater being across the street from a hospital. If there's an emergency, about an ambulance getting from that emergency to the hospital. Because I know going to shows, those before and after the show, the traffic just stacks up and stacks up and stacks up. And that's a major concern of mine.
Right, and it does. There's alternative ways to get into the hospital. There's a small window in which the amphitheater probably would involve traffic, and we'd want to be cautious of that. There'd be alternative routes for the ambulance. There's alternative ways to get into the hospital. There's also, the hospital has a helicopter, and we are working with the hospital now to actually have a helicopter located within the city for Ascension that would be their helicopter, and so there's always that if it's needed. But yeah, there would be alternative routes designed just like there are in other areas and where there are a hospital nearby with a venue that needs to be
Have we thought about an emergency lane with the upgrades we're doing at Medical Center anyway?
Yeah, that could be one of the design features. I mean, it's not in the design, but certainly, yeah, that would be a good idea to have an emergency lane probably that would allow for immediate and direct access into St. Thomas there. That certainly can be done.
We have any sound studies that might give us some data on what to expect, no matter which way they face the speakers or whatever, to, give us some more detailed idea of what somebody trying to rest in the hospital after surgery might be hearing, or to what degree?
Yeah, I know that some sound studies have been done on the Notes Live is building another amphitheater, and so they've done some sound studies. I probably asked Mr. Ahmad to address that. Of course, hospitals are not quiet areas to begin with. They have ambulances that come in and out, helicopters that fly in and out, and so there is ambient noise that surrounds that hospital pretty much all the time. But maybe Mr. Mudd can talk more about the sound studies that they've done.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for consideration. Listen Consultants is our consultant on sound. We're doing substantial work on our project in Colorado Springs right now, and understanding the levels of sound, both in terms of high frequency and low frequency sound as it relates to how the theater is designed and the direction that it's facing, will be an important part of our overall concept to meet city codes. And so I can tell you, with the hospital being kind of over the right shoulder of the back, when you look at the sound and the dissipation of sound, once you get beyond about 600 feet in the back of a venue, you start to see significant dissipation. Most of the concerns is the higher frequency sounds that are very directional, that would be going towards the crowd. And we've made significant changes from our initial design in Colorado Springs, consistent with having an urban environment where a venue like this is placed, and we will do the same here. We'll have the best in the United States with Listen Consultants out of New York that will participate and provide a sound study, and it would be something that definitely would want the community to be comfortable with.
Have we looked at other locations?
I have looked at many locations. We made the objective of getting into what I would call the broader Nashville market late last year. I have been up and down I-65 and east and west, and knew pretty quickly when we got to Murfreesboro that we felt like we had a municipality that both had the appetite and the target market for us. As it relates to locations within Murfreesboro, we looked just right out here at the Bottoms as a potential location. But when you begin to combine the three concepts together, the amount of acreage required to host something like that, and to consider parking implications, Medical Center Parkway is, we believe, the best location for this project.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. I'm curious, do you think this is an ideal site for this project? Because obviously you're going to make a substantial investment in the site if it moves forward. And so, one of the concerns I have, and I'm not an engineer, admittedly, but if I look at this site, I ask myself, why would anybody want to put an amphitheater at this site? And clearly I'm not trained in that area, but from a topography standpoint, it's very challenging how that slope comes up to the site. And as you're talking about, and it's hard for me, may not be for others, I can't visualize hardly anything until I see it. It's very hard to see how you're going to move that many vehicles in and out of this site in what we know currently is a challenging situation. So it's really hard for me to see what that's going to look like. But I'd be really interested in, you're the one making the investment in the site. Does that concern you?
Well, there's two concerns that I hear in your question. One is the nature of the construction of an amphitheater on a fairly flat and a piece of property that kind of fades back towards the river. And our architects are contending with, different than some of the other locations that we're looking at around the country, not being able to build into a natural berm. And we do have some pretty neat design implications that we think are going to work well. And there's a consideration also of putting a very high-end restaurant out in what I would call center field that would end up being an ingress and egress point and also a sound mitigation strategy all at the same time. In terms of traffic, we have the same concerns you do. We will not build an amphitheater with a population that we cannot effectively move people in and out of at full capacity. We've done a lot of study from highly urban environments such as locations in the tech center in Denver, which is completely surrounded by full development, and how that works, all the way over to looking at what's happened in Franklin, and Franklin has had some issues with their ingress and egress. And so it will be, Kimley Horn has been selected to do a very detailed traffic study. We'll be doing 12 locations, 12 intersections around town, and they're going to give us an assessment of what the nature of the improvements that the city is contemplating, and also the improvements, if you look at the agreement, we're signing up for some pretty significant improvements in the way that traffic will enter and exit that site. We will probably hold a higher standard than the city would in terms of the customer experience from a hospitality perspective. Being so close to I-24, one of the things that we're going to see is that probably 20 to 30% of every ticket sold is going to come from outside Rutherford County, and that may even be on the light side. And so it's access to I-24 and the potential for the improvements that could be happening at those junctures are all things that will be in our discussion to make sure we have selected the right site. We do believe at this point in time with the information that we have. And
having worked quite a bit with very large venues, having a game day traffic plan is what's most important. And so there are things that can be done to move traffic very quickly out. Whenever you load a large event, generally you have some traffic. Unloading is a big time because everybody leaves at the same time. People come at different times. They leave it all at the same time. And so that there is I don't want to say a science, but there's a lot of technical aspects and a lot of ways that you can handle traffic to unload that at a period of time. And, people kind of do expect that there will be some wait to get in and out of an event that unloads. That may happen at this event or this venue for a few events a year. It's not going to be on a regular basis. If you build a Major League Baseball stadium and you have 82 games, you're going to have 82 games in a short period of time that's going to affect your traffic over and over. And that's a big burden to place on a city, and cities do it all the time, even in very dense urban populations. The venue that we're talking about here will have events, they'll be spaced out over time, and with a game day plan that works very well, I think the community can adapt to, and the patrons that will be coming into the city can adapt to the traffic flow in and out of Medical Center.
What is the time frame that you're dealing with here? What are we talking about as far as time frame, and then phasing these projects in, the restaurants and the Coliseum?
Good question. Depending on the amount of time that it takes to get through the process of getting the plans approved, we think the Bourbon Brothers Smokehouse and Tavern and Boot Barn Hall is about an 18-month development process, and that the amphitheater could be in the 24-month development process. The touring business is one that books itself out for smaller acts 6 months in advance. The larger acts, which we believe we will attract with the amphitheater, can be as long as 2 years. And so the construction schedule will be a very important element of our business plan, making sure, that if we're going to bring the type of artists in here that we do and the prepayments that are required to attract that type of talent in here, we're going to hit our deadlines. So we would anticipate probably a 2024, given what we know today. would be the earliest that we would host a concert in the amphitheater. We think we might be able to accelerate the concerts that would be coming into Boot Barn Hall for multiple reasons.
I know we're planning, the idea is for us to keep, and I'm sorry, this is for Mr. Tyndall.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. About keeping the parking area in our name, is that right?
Right.
And are we, is there a plan for us to, like, are we going to charge for parking? Is that, I mean, are we getting revenues off that parking, or is it just, for right now, we're just talking about we're just parking?
Right, well, it won't be developed by the city. It'll be developed by Notes Live. So the fees generally would recover the development costs that would be associated with developing the parking. So I think the asking, we're not, right now the development agreement doesn't have the city obtaining any revenues from parking on there, but we can use it for city events. So we can activate it for a marathon, for example, or something along those lines if we wanted to use that parking area for that. Part of the parking area will be a trailhead for the Greenway, which runs right behind the back of this property. So we can certainly activate that area and program it for different things and activities that we have for use of that parking. But generally speaking, there's, because we're not putting any costs in it, we're not maintaining it, we're not repairing it, we're not keeping it clean, we're not carrying the day-to-day insurance on that piece of property. Fees for parking generally would go with the entity that's associated with those kind of costs. We're not picking up any of those costs.
My biggest concern, these other things have been brought up, the traffic and the hospital and the noise at the hospital, or the noise over the golf course when they're trying to play golf on a Friday afternoon or Saturday afternoon or whatever, when that might be happening. All that kind of stuff it concerns me. I guess, I'm not able to get right with the idea of, in essence, giving the property away. I recognize it's been sitting there for a while, but I don't care. I'd rather it sit there until a user that's willing to pay us for the property or willing to bring in a whole bunch of new, good, high-paying jobs. I don't know that I just don't remember giving away any property over there that didn't offer that. And so, to not have any, we're also giving up the revenue on the property tax that would be there, the opportunity cost for the parking lot piece as well. Am I thinking of that right? We're not going to get property tax on the part that we own.
We still own it, so there would be no tax on it. We do have the development right on that. We need to work with whoever develops it to replace the parking to make sure that the venue still has parking for that. But we do have the development rights over that to improve that in the future. So. We've had this piece of property for 20 years. We haven't had any, we've marketed it very aggressively for corporate sites. There's some distinct drawbacks to the piece of property that it hasn't been successful. There's not a lot of large corporate sites from an economic development standpoint that are out there. They're pretty far unless it's manufacturing, which we don't want to put out there. But the corporate office site type of thing is not showing up as much as it did in the past for a corporate campus type of situation. So this seems well suited in there. Like Mr. Mudd said, the sounds studies will be addressed. There's lots of ways to attenuate sounds. There's lots of science that goes into sounds that can be used. As far as golf, generally speaking, I think most of the shows, and it'll be an outdoor venue, so when it's warm and nice, you're probably not going to load that amphitheater up with a lot of people. It'll be at night when it's cooler and there won't be anybody out there playing golf. But the way it has to be built, I think a lot of that sound is going to be buffered anyway, particularly if they put as Mr. Mudd said, the restaurant in the outfield there that will absorb some of that sound.
Can I ask another question? And we may, I should know the answer to this and I don't, but if we had 2 or 3 or 4 comparable sites, would this still be the site we would choose for this?
I think the site has a lot of benefit to it. One, we can certainly, because we own it, we can restrict what goes on there, and we can dictate some of the uses that goes on there and what's allowed and what's not allowed. We can do that to a certain extent to zoning, but nowhere near what we can do if we have and own the property. It's a good use for that property. It's been sitting there vacant for a long period of time. It brings a lot of other development around it. We already understand that there are other sites that are next to and close to it that already have deals ready to go because we've activated this site with a project that's very exciting. There's some, and Mr. Mudd probably could talk more about this. Their anticipation is to use a lot of media and to really focus on Murfreesboro itself. That brings attention to the city, and you can't discount that for future economic development projects. That's a very important thing that that we as a city may lack right now, is a lot of people in different parts of the country not really knowing about Murfreesboro. If you have a venue like this that's using broadcast media and different types of media to bring attention to the city, that really does help. I think it's a good finish for, and I say finish only because a lot of the property in there is being used up. We don't have a whole lot of property in there. A good finish for Medical Center. It helps the other projects that are there. This will vastly help the fountains that's there. It's pretty successful as it is now. It's taken a lot of years to get there, but this will advance a lot of the other property that's left around there just because of the type of excitement that it'll bring.
I think also too, Mr. Martin, as I stated before, these two projects that came before us tonight, TDK could have gone to the bottoms. TDK could have came downtown. I thought that would have been a great spot for TDK. Help kick off downtown. But I also think this is an opportunity for us to get a major player as far as a venue where we can have entertainment. One of the things we've heard from our citizens for years is we don't have an entertainment venue here. We go to Nashville. Kirk Franklin's in Nashville tonight. He could be here. So.
See you opening for Motley Crue.
Yes.
Ben Folds.
He's praying for Motley Crue. So, like I said, there's not a perfect, as Bill stated earlier, there's nothing perfect about what we're having to do about these two venues tonight, and this is no exception to the rule. I think if we give them an opportunity to show us that they can make sure that the sound doesn't affect those across the street at the hospital, I think this is an opportunity to really turn our city around and have more people visiting Murfreesboro and having a better opportunity to showcase what Murfreesboro is all about.
And we'll
I wasn't even going to go there. I was just going to let it slide.
Make Murfreesboro great again. What? I mean, what are we?
I didn't say we wasn't great. Well, yeah. I mean, and we continue to focus on the downtown area, and we have projects that we're going to bring forward, and we've had interest on other projects in downtown that fit there. This one really needed a combination because of the aspects of it, a combination of somewhat of an urban setting because you have high-end restaurants and enough land to do the music venues as well. And it would be great to put it down at the bottoms, but it would take decades to incorporate enough property as divided as it is to put that all together.
Personally, I thought it would go better at not the 96 property, the park property.
Yeah.
Or Veterans Park.
Veterans Parkway, where you got the 96 property, quick access to 840 in two directions, Veterans, 96 back into Murfreesboro. That's just me personally.
Yeah, I looked at the.
Well, with the venue, if it was just a concert venue, yes, but if you're going to put the restaurants in there, then you're isolating the restaurants far off into an area that doesn't really fit.
I think ultimately, where I've landed on this, for years I've wanted, and I'm in absolutely the minority that they said it was crazy. Like, I love the opportunity to have venues downtown. Like, I would love to see us a minor league baseball team. Never will happen. Never say never, but we continue to drive to Nashville to do anything, and I think this is a good benefit for our residents to be able to stay here. I have significant concerns about Medical Center Parkway and the traffic on Medical Center, but staff and engineering says that y'all have a plan for that will mitigate that. But then I keep falling back to, surely if it wasn't the right site, someone wouldn't spend $30 million on a site, or a bank or financial partners wouldn't fund a bad project. And so that's what I keep going back to, that I think it's overall something to be a positive. And Rick, I understand where you are, 20 years of the corporate headquarters site, but I think the corporate headquarters site has changed where, in my opinion, the 1,000 employee companies are almost impossible to get anymore. It's more 50, 75, 100, and those are the ones I think are more reasonable that you can handle. And to the land thing, anyone who doesn't think that 1,000 unit or 1,000 employed corporation doesn't come in and they're not going to want free land or tax abatements or sales tax abatements, they're everyone going to come in and ask for that. And that's, I think this will cost us less money than it would be for a corporation that's coming in and provide more economic benefit, in my opinion.
And I'll add one more thing on the traffic study. Because of where this is located, the other large economic, the legacy sports economic development that we've talked about, and the development at TDOT, and that development is planning for goes all the way down to the medical center intersection. And so improving that intersection and traffic out onto Broad and then onto 840 to go either direction, going back to Nashville, back to 24, so is another route in plan for Broad Street. With that project, will handle an enormous amount of traffic that would be beneficial, I think, for this project in loading and unloading it as well.
So to be clear here, are we saying that we think this venue will bring more economic benefit than 1,000 like high-paying jobs? Is that what is that what we think this is going to do for the city?
I don't think that's what we think, but I think that when you look at the thing that we voted on last Thursday night, where we got 119 acres, where someone would willingly be rather have a venue like that, or a corporation would be rather be next to an interstate as opposed to restaurants, in my opinion.
And as the mayor said, we're not getting projects with 1,000 jobs associated with it. I mean, Oracle downtown Nashville is a major job thing, but those things are once in a lifetime kind of.
I think most people gave up on bringing good jobs here a long time ago, unfortunately.
Well, it's just, I will say that these type of venues, like I said before, bring attention to Murfreesboro, and there's, as people who do economic development go out and they talk to corporations, or they go back and talk to boards, and they want to say we're going to put something somewhere. They don't want the board to say where. They want it to say,
I like the project.
I've heard that.
I just
so it adds to it. There was another point, I forgot it, that the mayor had brought up that I was going to add to, and I forgot that. I'll think of it perhaps before we're done.
I like the project. It's just the money thing. I mean, for me, I just think I'd give the property away for other things. I probably just wouldn't for this. It's what the property was for. It's pretty simple, but it's all right. That's it.
I'd like to see a traffic plan before, and to know, I'm like the mayor. I think people would, if you're going to put $30 million in something, you're going to decide.
I do think the good part, we're looking at approving a development agreement, but this is still going to have to go through you guys at Planning Commission before it would ever be approved. So I would say to the Planning Commission and our council representatives, who I'm not sure who that'll be by the time this goes through, that's going to have to be a discussion at the council or at the Planning Commission level to make sure that this is addressed.
And I'll make one more comment. One of the things that concerns me, I think the concept of this is great. So, I think it's a big deal. I don't disagree with a lot of the comments that Craig's made. It is a little tricky for me knowing I will not be here to see it through from an approval standpoint. So that's complicated for me. I would not want to make the decision because I also know that when we get new council members in, there's a learning curve as that ramps up. It just is. So I'm probably going to abstain because of that. So I'm not taking the easy path, but if I can't see it through to a completion, I'm probably not going to.
What specifically are we being asked to approve tonight? Like when we say it's the development agreement, what's the specifics of what we're saying?
Well, this gives some solid ground to the developer to move forward now to spend a substantial amount of money on design. There are contingencies. They have to design it according to the Gateway Commission or the Gateway Overlay, GDO. They'll have to go through the planning process, and we'll talk about traffic studies and noise and things along those lines will all be discussed. So there's several more steps to go through, but the development agreement gives them a solid ground to move forward with those type of activities, which are very expensive. It's a major project. It's a $35 million investment, and generally these kind of projects come with a development agreement to kind of get things started and make it sure that council has approved that we can move forward with this project, understanding the terms of the development agreement and the contingencies that are in there that they'll need to fulfill.
Are we committing to the dollars? Are we committing to the terms that are in here as far as keeping the parking lot and also the giving away of the property or the loan forgiveness or what however you want to term that, the loan forgiveness?
Well, the property purchase price is paid by a commitment to perform certain standards or a cash payment. So it's either or. That's how the property is recovered. The property cost of the property is recovered for the 8 to 9 acres that the venues are going to be on. So yeah, that's a commitment. I mean, we wouldn't turn around and say, well, we want now the cash. That wouldn't be appropriate to do under the development agreement.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of asking that from the standpoint of what Ronnie was talking about. There is going to be at least a couple new council members that we're going to be committing them to selling this property in that way.
Yeah.
Is the Coliseum a taxable feature?
Taxable is.
I mean, will they pay?
Oh yes, yeah. All the venues on the private land.
Just the park.
It's just the parking facility. And so the parking facility itself, if they had bought it and developed it, would only have the value of the parking facility. I mean, the property tax dollars on that are not substantial. It's really on the value of the investment is really going into the buildings itself. And so that will pay property tax on it. Of course, there'll be sales tax on the venue and what goes on in the venue, and mixed drink tax and restaurant taxes and things.
I think it's a good project. I just don't like the location. And, we approve something and then we'll look around and we're still in the same predicament we are with the roads, without seeing the actual road plan. I don't know.
Well, Medical Center was built to be expanded, so the road plan would follow, a widening, and I don't know if Mr. Griffith's here, but it was designed to be improved, to be widened, because we all knew that it would require that at some point in time. So it won't be any kind of wildly different plan. I think the emergency lane to the hospital might be a good idea, but I don't think you're going to see a plan that's going to be very different than what you envisioned or what was envisioned when the road was designed originally.
There are some thresholds that are projected in this that talk about, when you're going to break ground. I guess June 1st next year. And then 18 months, I think, is what you had said about the construction time, about 18 months in the first phase of this. and then 2 years basically for the whole project to be completed, you think, after that June date? Is that right, about right?
So it's about, that's a projection right now, right? Some of that's going to be dictated by our design process and planning process.
The question might be, is that a threshold that we can expect some improvement on medical center?
Yeah, well, that's going to be dependent on council's decisions with respect to funding. We believe that we can make recommendations to council on funding and get that road project underway, at least portions of it that will be the most beneficial to
traffic flow.
For traffic flow. And I do recall now what I was going to bring up. I know if we talked long enough, I would, but
that's an attorney.
Yeah. So if this was a corporate site, we had kind of conceptually done some of the traffic work, and I credit Mr. Huddleston who does the better thinking on these kind of things than almost anybody. Is if we put a corporate site in there and filled that up, the traffic that would come from that site with a corporate site on it would be equal to what we would have at the amphitheater itself. The problem, of course, with the corporate site is it would come during rush hour, and this would come probably later in the evening after the venue was used. So the traffic volume is about the same. The timing of the traffic volume, which is extremely important, is vastly different and beneficial for traffic on that roadway. That makes sense?
Yeah, we had, I think something in here talked about I mean, at least the conversation's been about having a trailhead or something up there to access the Greenway, and that, has that cross the river kind of thought entered into the conversation too, that you...
Cross the river figuratively or
really, you had to
literally
get across the river.
Yeah,
So
no.
in other words, like Nashville, where you're crossing the river to get to access, you actually park on the other side of the river.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
My thought is that traffic flow could be affected if you parked on the other side of the river and accessed Old Fort.
Well, yes, and so it's been designed or been planned for a long time that Gateway Boulevard would be extended to Robert Rose, and that's been in the works, and that's been on the CIP, and so that's well along in the planning process, and that would be another exit point that would come out.
In and out, yeah.
Right, probably more for local,
Yeah.
because that would lead back in there, but it would also access to Old Fort Parkway and then back to 24. So there's a couple of different routes, but yeah, that was...
They can create another access route.
Yeah, so that, but the trailhead...
Great idea.
Yeah, the trailhead itself runs along that side of the river. I wasn't sure what you're asking for, but it runs along that side of the river, and so, that's why this parking area would be beneficial to, on a daily basis, to be used for trailhead parking.
Craig, the way that you built out the loan repayment, or, whatever we would call that.
Well, we wouldn't call it a loan because we don't do loans, but it's an arrangement to pay for the property, right?
Okay, yeah, where we forgive them though, or whatever, I don't know what you would call it then, but basically they're not.
Performance standards.
Yeah, the performance, I mean, they're not actually handing us dollars as long as they hit those performance standards, correct?
Right, because of the economic benefits that they'll be creating with those standards.
Okay, so do we think through from a standpoint of, it seems just logical without doing the math on the numbers, that if they're not hitting some standards for their businesses, it might be difficult for them to pay us the cash that they would owe us. If they're not hitting those standards, if they're not having the events, are they going to be able to afford to pay us $5 million for the property? Did you guys take a look at that to see if we had some control measures for that?
Yeah, and the repayment is over time. But remember that it's not just the venue itself. It would be a commitment from the corporation over. So you have the restaurant, you have the smaller music venue, and then you have the larger venue. The events are tied to the larger venue. So if that were to slip off the standards, you'd still have the other venues that would generally be creating enough revenue that would allow for a repayment of the purchase price, and it's an amount that isn't anything to sneeze at. Certainly we'd want to take it, but it's not an amount that a very successful restaurant, which we would anticipate this wouldn't be able to absorb. I don't think they would choose to do that. Certainly, they'd choose to have the venue in as much use as possible.
Is that all the discussion?
So if we approve this on contingents that you bring it back a traffic study?
Well, yeah, a traffic study is planned.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be part of the process that we would do anyway. And I think that's been requested. Where's Sam? Yeah, Matt's right here. Matt's shaking his head. He's going to get the traffic study done.
When would be the next time we get a chance to see something here? What is?
Probably in the planning decision process.
Okay. And that's going to have traffic. That'll have the traffic.
Yeah, that's when traffic is normally addressed. Certainly sound would be addressed at that point in time. So.
Traffic and sound. All right, I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skells Harris.
No.
Mr. LaLance.
No.
Mr. Martin.
Abstain.
Mr. Shacklet.
Yes.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
No.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Motion failed.
All right, we'll move to Community Development 2022-2023 Annual Action Plan.
Evening, Mayor, members of council, here tonight before you to present the Community Development 2022 Annual Action Plan. This is required from the, as part of our HUD funding, and it's something we do annually. And so each year the action plan, the city receives notice from HUD about our annual allocations. This year we received notice that $971,000 will be coming into community development block grant funding, and $505,000 will be new funding for the home program that is issued again by HUD, and that's our annual funding. As a condition of that funding, we have a 5-year consolidated plan and then implement our actions through specific annual action plans, and we're presenting this year's annual action plan to you. The plan includes specific narrative for expending those funds, including citizen participation, expected resources, annual projects, and project summaries, affordable housing, public housing, and barriers to affordable housing. And we're also required to certify to HUD citizen participation, anti-displacement and relocation, an analysis of impediments of fair housing, and those things are in place for us to do. The annual action plan was put on public notice for review and comment. We held a public hearing at the start and then a second public hearing at the end, and we received, quite honestly, very, very limited input and conversation, generally from stakeholders who are interested in funding that might be available through the program. It's the city's longstanding policy to affirmatively further fair housing. To that end, we include allocations to help support fair housing education, and management of fair housing complaints, which are handled through our community development department. And then all CBDG funds are there to benefit low and moderate income persons or prevent slum or blight, and meeting urgent needs. And then with this year's notice, HUD also included funding for the home program. This is first time funding for us. Again, the primary purpose of the home program is to expand affordable housing options for persons of low and moderate income. These funds are used to assist low and moderate income, and then that definition of what those are, and that information is available from statistics from the Nashville-Murfreesboro area as to what levels the area median income and household size are. We use those to determine the eligibility for participation in the program and funding from the projects. We receive these allocations on an annual basis, and they're based on a variety of things, including population, poverty, and housing availability. This year, as I'd earlier mentioned, HUD notified us of these funding amounts. We also have program income, which is repayment of down payment assistance and other program activities from previous years that come back in. That gives us our total allocation of funding for the program. And you see all of the four elements that would be funding the community development program, and then also the home program. Single-family owner-occupied home rehabilitation is a priority this year for us. First-time homebuyer assistance, funding of public service grants, funding of public facility improvements. Of course, there's money in that budget for administrative expenses to our program and for some other activities in planning and survey for economic development, and also to fund our fair housing. Those are the priorities that we've identified through the consolidated plan and the development of the annual action plan. As we break down these categories, the HUD allocations allow us to fund our program through the allocation of certain administrative funds. Those administrative and planning allowances for both CBDG and home are here on this slide, and then funding that we anticipate to be available for housing rehabilitation are listed here, and our goal is to try to assist 10 households there. So you see activities from us from time to time where we bring recommendations to you to assist with home rehabilitation and emergency repairs. We also propose to assist first-time home buyers by making available down payment assistance. We propose to fund that at $130,000 this year to be able to assist up to 10 households. Generally, those recently have been coming through the Rutherford County Habitat for Humanity, where we provide down payment assistance for their clients. And then this is a breakdown of how we propose to prioritize the home funding. There's some program elements that have to be in there. Those are on your top lines. We'll be funding the Community Development Housing Organization set aside and operating funding, and then the balance of that we propose to go to affordable housing, perhaps new construction and homeownership assistance. And so that total funding gets us to the 454. And then our public service grants, that is grants that we give to partnering agencies. And so this year we propose to fund public service grants at $127,000. These are the proposed agencies that we identified for funding. And we have contacted them about their program needs and ability to utilize those funds. And so this is our proposal for public service grant. A couple more slides and we'll work through all of our funding recommendations here, but we do propose a downtown business district planning and survey study. That's the $50,000 there for economic development, and also we propose $370,000 to support public facility improvements. That'd be sidewalk, drainage, street improvements, ADA upgrades, public buildings that are not used for government purposes, and other public facilities, water and sewer lines, for example. And so that's our recommendations on the annual action plan. We need your approval of this document tonight to be able to move forward with our implementation of our program elements and authorization for funding from HUD. Be glad answering questions on the action plan and the recommendations we have for you this year.
Any questions for Mr. Holston? Thank you for your hard work on this.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, item 21, Clearspan Fabric Structures, change order number 2 for the soccer park.
Good evening,
Mr.
Mayor,
Williams.
members of council. This is a change order with Clearspan it's to correct an omission that was not included with contract documents. For electrical work, it totals $28,357. Mr. Lyle Lynch is here with Johnson Bailey Architects. I'm going to ask him just to give a little bit more of a detailed explanation of what we're doing here.
$15 million soccer field, we keep that.
Mayor, members of the council, my name's Lyle Lynch, and I'm with Johnson & Bailey Architects. I've had the privilege of being your consulting architect on the Siegel soccer building. This is a unique and exciting project, unique in the way that it's a fabric structure building. One of the goals from the start of the design was to create a very energy efficient building. And if you've been inside the structure yet, you'll note that since it's a fabric structure, during the daytime hours, there's a lot of lighting that's provided by natural light that filters through the structure. We have a LED lighting system, and then we have a electrical controls for those systems to raise and lower the lighting. The LED lighting is needed to supplement the natural lighting. We also have 6 large circulation fans to create a gentle breeze on hot days inside the building, and we have fan controllers to allow those fans to be operated at variable speeds depending on how much is needed. There's also, on one end of the building, there's also a ventilation system on summer conditions to keep the building from getting hotter than the outside conditions. And on one end of the building is 12 large exhaust fans. And the other side has intake louvers, 32 intake louvers. So the air from the outside can be moved through enough to keep the building from overheating. What we failed to include in the contract was controllers for the exhaust fans and air intake louvers. Once this was discovered, we designed a controller that will allow the fans to be operated individually so that the amount of ventilation can be increased as the need arises and decreased during other times. Let's see here. We have a cost that you have in front of you. I've reviewed these costs and find them reasonable. This work was not included in the construction contract. Work is nearing completion, and we don't anticipate any other additional cost items.
Mayor, this is, again, $28,357, and it's included with our total budget. We won't have to make any other adjustments and savings that we already have.
Any
Glad to
questions?
answer any questions.
I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
No.
Mr. Wright.
No.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Purchase of roll-off truck, solid waste.
Well, Mr. Gossett comes to the microphone. I just want to tell him congratulations on his new daughter,
Yes, thank you.
born just recently.
Sunday.
Sunday.
Congratulations.
So congratulations.
Also 3 for us. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you is a request to approve the purchase of a 2005 Mack roll-off truck. This is a used truck from Williamson County surplus. The Solid Waste Department is responsible for the open-top dumpsters located at the city's convenience center. Currently, these dumpsters are being hauled to the landfill by a third-party hauler, which we are paying $500 a week to haul. So by purchasing this truck, we would essentially save that operational expense and also open up opportunities within other departments in the city to make better disposal options. The purchase for this truck is $32,000, and it is funded in FY22 solid waste fixed accounts. I'm available for any questions.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Is this your first child?
Third child.
Third child.
2
okay.
boys and a girl.
God bless you. So you know about having a roll-off truck with money. That's what you're gonna have to have. All right. You have any? I don't see any beer permits.
We have none tonight.
That's a first. All right. Board and commission appointments. You have reappointments to the Parks and Recreation Board and to the Water and Sewer Board.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Okay, okay. I mean, that was any statements to be paid?
No.
Okay, any other business from staff? Any other business from council?
Reminder about Celebration Under the Stars.
That's right, celebrate. Nate, you want to tell us about, is Nate already gone?
4 o'clock, starts 4 o'clock at Fountains, concert at 7, I think, or 6.
What date's that on?
I think it's July the 4th. I'm not sure. This year it'll be on July the 4th.
Hey, so all the residents out there, be safe, have a great July 4th.
It's dry.
Yeah, and that's, so make sure it is extremely dry outside. We are under a burn ban. There's not a fireworks ban, but just make sure that it would be much better for you to come watch the city fireworks than shoot your own fireworks. So with that, we'll stand adjourned.